is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. I didn't have much on my mind last week. I wanted to think about some things because obviously, as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for over a year, the esoteric side, the Talking to the Dead side, became something that I never expected, where it was actually linking to the sort of conspiracy theory side about visiting aliens and UAPs and everything else. And I found that really fascinating. And it wasn't until the last few episodes that I managed to get it clear in my mind, and from all the various things that had been said to me, that we're talking about the same thing, that essentially religion, our beliefs in everything religious, all the religious books going back thousands of years, the psychic phenomena, mediumship, witchcraft, all the esoteric arts, black magic, whatever it may be, will all have their foundation, essentially, in information that was passed to humans or interpreted by humans by multi-dimensional beings. Now, that is tremendously controversial to say that, but without doubt, that is what I now believe from having had these experiences, talking to various people who are in other dimensions, and seeing all the information that's been passed to me, is continually being passed to me, things that I see on television and the internet and on YouTube. And, you know, I think it really has made me much happier to really understand once and for all that we as humans are part of the multidimensional universe. We're not aside from it. It's just that we are, while we're in the physical body, less attuned to it. And as we've discussed over the last year, there are ways that you can attune yourself into it if you wish to. And we are constantly being bombarded, if you like, by messages from alternate realities, other dimensions, and we tend to interpret that as different things. Now, the idea of interpreting those messages or visions or whatever it has been as religious doctrine is something which, again, as I said, is quite controversial. But I just wanted to touch on a few things this week, stuff I started last week, that is bringing this all together for me. And I hope for you, because I think it's completely fascinating. And it's far more easy, I think, from a scientific point of view to understand that religion and life after death and all of this stuff is a very scientific reality, although it's a science that we are not really that familiar with and is only just being investigated in the quantum realm, for instance. But the fact that in my mind now I've realized that we're not talking about sort of the esoteric. We're not talking about angels and demons and everything else. We're talking about a perfectly rational, as you might want to say, scientific explanation for everything that up till now has been described as being faith and a religion and a belief. It's to me no more than that if you say that I believe in fairies. That's to me a kind of crazy simplification, because fairies do exist, because enough people have actually willed them to exist, that they've created thought forms that are fairies and pixies. I think we've discussed that before. Just as much as there is a thought form for Jesus or for the Prophet Muhammad or for the Buddha, or all of the people, all the historical religious leaders still have a huge impact on people and our world because of the power and the energy that's been put into their memory. And still they are worshipped, and a lot is done in their name, so they have a strong force. We created that reality with our thoughts, and the original thing that probably started those thoughts came about because of messages being sent either to humans or out into the world from other dimensions. So in the last week, on multidimensional beings, it was very interesting that Donald Trump gave a press conference, or rather I should say his press secretary gave a press conference. And as you might know from following this podcast and others, he promised that when he came into office, he would tell us the truth about a lot of things that he considers have been covered up by the United States government, things like the JFK assassination, etc., etc. But he was also going to say what these drones were, or these sightings that a lot of people, and I think obviously most people, now consider to be probably visitors from either another dimension or from another planet, as well as probably a mixture of things such as hobbyist drones flying around and maybe even other governmental secret projects. But of course, I was really hoping there was going to be a really good bit of disclosure, and Donald Trump or his messengers would tell us the truth about what's been happening all over the world, not just over New Jersey, but it's been happening all over the world, that people have seen unidentified flying objects at night mainly, doing crazy things in terms of speed and maneuverability, and being able to stay up there for way beyond any power source that we know of could actually keep it up there. Well, very disappointingly, and I think all the people who look at this in detail and have done documentaries on this are massively disappointed with the information that came out. It wasn't even from Donald Trump's mouth, which tells you something, perhaps. Maybe he knows something and he just doesn't feel comfortable standing in front of the world's press and either denying it, though it's true, or maybe he's been got at, you could say. Maybe there's something that people have got on him in the deep state, if that's what's keeping it secret, and he felt unable at this point to tell what it was. And his press secretary gave a very, very crazy answer, which was basically they've determined that it's not the enemy. They've determined that it was a mixture of hobbyist drones and also military drones. They were doing authorized research, but he said other things as well, but they didn't say what the other things were. It was just the most pathetic sort of denial that it was anything of any importance, and nothing to see here was basically the message. But of course, this was in complete contradiction to all the people that were wheeled out weeks ago when all this drone stuff started happening or being noticed. And, very senior people within the government and the military were basically saying they didn't know what it was. They had absolutely no idea what it was, and they were entertaining all sorts of theories as to what it was. So why now would the White House suddenly say, well, yes, of course we knew what it was all along, and it was us, and nothing to worry about, and it doesn't make any sense. And it sounds like a cover-up again. And particularly since if they were doing research, what were they researching in the middle of the night? There's nothing being said about that. So it's a very strange situation. So I thought I'd mention that, and I think I'm rather disappointed because it seems so hard for the United States government, which is obviously probably the biggest recipient of alien visitations and alien technology, and maybe that's also because more people talk about it than any other country. But it's very disappointing that the chance we had this time around to start telling the American people the truth about what's going on in the skies didn't happen, and it was a complete wasted opportunity. And I think it's not the end of it, of course, because a lot of other things have happened in the last week. A number of people came forward in the last week. Again, you can find all of this on the internet. I'll try to leave some links so you can see it yourself, but you can just do the research. But a number of people have come forward, as was predicted as we come into January. A lot of whistleblowers are coming forward. A lot of information is starting to be leaked by people who feel more emboldened now to be able to tell what they know. And what was particularly interesting, I think, in terms of this podcast, was a discussion I saw where it's believed that a number of these interdimensional beings that are coming through, now these interdimensional beings are not necessarily humanoid, they are actually from different races that have evolved. And the indication was, as is quite obvious, there are hundreds and hundreds of different races out there of intelligent life. And by the sound of it, hundreds of these races have and are visiting Earth and have made contact with the top people in government and otherwise. And many of the reasons they're keeping it quiet is because various treaties have been signed that have a sort of a quid pro quo, where the alien species are obtaining something that they want on Earth, while we are obviously obtaining stuff that we want, such as knowledge about weaponry, travel, the propulsion, magnetism, telepathy, God knows what else is being reverse engineered also from various craft that have either crashed or been left behind or have been given to us. So what was particularly interesting was that this particular guy was saying that it's probably one particular race of, let's get aliens, I've got to find a catch-all word for this, let's just say interdimensional beings that have been living amongst us. And this is nothing new. I mean, some people call them Nordics. And he described his first meeting with the Nordic, and it was while he was in the military, and he was in a desert in the United States, where it all seems to happen. And he actually did get out of his vehicle, and he saw one standing in the road. And rather like last week, where we described this incredible feeling when you actually meet one, this guy felt the same. He was not speaking a language, but he knew what this guy was saying, this alien was saying, and he didn't need to speak, vocalize. Everything came through his mind directly to that being, and the communication was instantaneous and easy and free flowing. It was like, my God, I've been doing this all my life. How come, and I had no idea I had this ability. And he got some information from this being. It turned out that this being needed some help, and I think his vehicle had crashed nearby, and he was asking for a particular element that he could use to repair his ship. But he described again this incredible sense of connection between this guy and the whole of the universe. As soon as he was being attuned to a communication with this being, it opened his mind, almost like a drug, to a communication with the whole wider cosmos that is out there and all the life that exists. That was very interesting. But he said, if you look at this thing, it was tall and blonde, and he could see that those were the archetypal angels. Those are the things, perhaps, through the history of mankind, that these particular interdimensional beings have been visiting, and people may well have then described them as angels. And then conversely, he was aware, although he hasn't actually met them, there are other races that we would consider to be more reptilian in look. Again, I've heard this from friends about the reptilians, and I think it's been made quite famous by various conspiracy theorists. But the idea, of course, would be that either these species of reptilian, highly intelligent reptilian bipeds, because they were walking on 2 feet, but they have a very reptilian look, they could be either the natural evolution from, wait for it, the dinosaurs that lived on the planet Earth billions of years, or they could be a species that evolved out of the dinosaurs that had left the Earth. They had got to that point that they could actually go to other galaxies, and then they come back to perhaps see or to visit, or they've got some purpose here. I just thought about that, okay, and there is a lot out there, and it's something that I've always wondered, and this is something I really want to see if I can get some answers to today as well, spiritually. It does seem crazy to me that human beings have been on the planet for a few million years. I think, as intelligent species, we're talking a few 100,000 years, and as a sort of a physical species, as evolved as it's been explained by science, from monkeys, basically, from primates, we're talking 4 or 5 million years, I think. But the dinosaurs were on the planet for hundreds of millions of years, as I understand it, and yet the time that has passed, the physical evidence, all that exists now, are fossils. And the older you go, the further you go back, these fossils are becoming more and more hard to find for various reasons, not least because, even stone after a few 100 million years doesn't last any longer. But also there may have been all sorts of things that have happened, in various points of human history that would have erased the fossil record, or erased anything from ever being able to turn into a fossil. We obviously explain the absence of the dinosaurs by a comet or a meteorite that came down and allegedly sent those who were in the immediate vicinity, a few hundred square miles, into dust, but also so much dust was kicked out it caused a global cooling as the sun was blotted out, and it killed off, this is the explanation science has given, and it killed off the dinosaurs or any land animals because they couldn't get food anymore because photosynthesis was not possible, and plant life all died out, therefore all the food died out, and then the animals just basically ate each other that were on the surface, and once they'd all eaten, it was the same old rat in the barrel thing. The last rat was left and died off, and those last dinosaurs that died off, we've obviously got fossil records of. But those who were in the sea survived because under the sea they were protected, and they weren't particularly needing an awful lot of sunlight-based food. I think there was obviously a certain amount of light, or a certain amount that could enable various sea vegetation to grow, and enough to be able to cause to allow small animals to survive, and perhaps the larger ones died out as well because they ran out of food. Whatever that might be, but that's just one theory that is given by science. But potentially, you've got civilizations that happened before the dinosaurs that we have no record of because they were either the record was wiped out by some catastrophe, or we haven't been able to find that evidence. So there's no reason in all the billions of years of Earth's history why there couldn't have been a number of highly intelligent and developed species of animal that have long since left this planet, in the same way as Elon Musk wants us to start colonizing Mars, or they are still here. But they are living in a different situation. They either live in a different dimension and discovered how to live multidimensionally, or they live underground or under the ocean, or they have moved to other planets. So incredibly interesting. But back to the point about the evolution of the dinosaurs, it would be crazy for me to say this is fact. I don't know. This is something that is being mentioned, but it's worth me telling you, because if it is true that dinosaurs weren't all killed, and they actually did evolve, more likely than not, they would have evolved in a similar way as perhaps we evolved, and would have eventually ended up on 2 legs, would have ended up becoming intelligent and being able to create a society. Now, people are saying these reptilians potentially could be the end result of the dinosaurs, as much as we say the birds are. It's been suggested that these reptilians are not very nice, and they're quite needing of blood. And I've heard even things being said that they have a bloodlust. Now that's fascinating, because that could lead to all the ancient stories of blood-sucking animals, whether it's vampires or whatever else it might be. But also, of course, it means you've got a perfect creature that could be, by ancient civilizations of humans, be described as evil, as a serpent, as a devil, which of course was something that you get in the Bible with the Garden of Eden. So you've suddenly got your angels and you've got your demons. And again, very rational scientific explanations if that's the case. Now, given that I believe as much as 30% of Americans are extremely religious and evangelical, and huge amounts of them voted for Donald Trump in the election. Another thing that came by me in the last week, which interested me a lot, is how the evangelical movement in the United States of America do see Donald Trump as a form of savior. Now, I don't want to get political. I'm not trying to be political here at all. Really, I'm not. I just think it's very interesting, the language that's coming out and the way things are being described. And if you like, also the way that it's trying to answer what the evangelicals through the Bible, and I think other religions do too, answer as being the second coming, or various signs that would indicate a second coming. Now, the way that the evangelical Christians and the way you hear with Donald Trump supporters is that it's very fascinating. They describe him almost as the savior of America, to make America great again. But of course, the Christians believe that he has almost got a godlike status, that he is almost like the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, in the Bible, of course, that was described as the Antichrist, as the one that would come and he would fool people into thinking that he was the savior, and everybody would go crazy following him, but he was really going to be leading them to death and destruction. Now, I have no real comment about that, other than just observing that so far things are happening in the world, and a lot of attention is being placed on Donald Trump. And a lot of what he's doing is also based in now the Middle East, where, of course, religions are centralized. And only today, last night, in American time, Donald Trump gave a press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and described how his biggest thing that he's going to be doing at the moment is basically is helping Israel fight against Hamas. And he mentioned that he really feels that what happened with the attack last year by Hamas, it was an all-out attack on the Jewish state and in the Jewish homeland. Now, this is language that is very, very emotive, because you're talking about one religion again against another, which is obviously Judaism against Islam, and the support of Judaism by the Christians, particularly in the United States. So suddenly you've got the Christians aligning themselves with the Jews and considering the Islamists to be the enemy. Now, this is worrying, but also, doesn't it sound like something extraordinary that you'd find in the religious interpretation of what will happen in the future? Now, this is perhaps just wishful thinking on their part, because they want the Bible predictions to come true, and they're using Donald Trump as the person who is going to embody the truth as they see it in the Bible, and that he is actually going to rid the large swathes of the Middle East of people who believe in Islam. Now, This is quite worrying, but this is what's going on. And he even said last night that America is going to take over the Gaza Strip, and it's basically nothing more than just a bombed out building site now, and he's going to forcibly remove the 1.8 million Palestinians from Gaza for their own good and their own safety and their own harmony and well-being, and he's going to work with many rich states in the area to take these 1.8 million Palestinians for good, and they will not be, I understand, allowed to return to the Gaza Strip. And America is going to take over the Gaza Strip, and Israel will take over the Gaza Strip, and it will be redeveloped only then into I presume, an extension of the state of Israel. Again, I can't see that the other Middle Eastern countries in the neighborhood there, or even further afield, are going to take this lying down. You know, what are we doing here? It seems terribly worrying to basically go into these countries now by America and to forcibly take the people out of it and to expect them all just to accept this. Now, could that be, I'm just suggesting, could that be the Antichrist prediction, where it was promised that somebody would come and he would do great things and help people, but in fact what he's going to do is potentially lead to even greater catastrophes and even more conflict on a biblical scale, in a place where all the biblical stories were originally conceived. The third thing I just wanted to mention, which struck me this week, was I read an article that they've been doing research on bonobo apes. And it's been long known that bonobo apes are highly intelligent animals. But I'm very interested, particularly since I heard about remote viewing that the government had been doing, and the technology that they've potentially got from interdimensional beings, and the way that we would communicate with UAPs and with interdimensional beings being, as we describe it, as being psychic, as being through the mind, through thought. But the bonobo apes had a very interesting study that was done on them, and it was trying to see if they could work out through the power of their mind where the human had actually put the food. From what I'm reading, bonobo apes knew where the food was when the humans had placed it there without them ever seeing it or smelling it or seeing it. They knew about it because of the thought transference from the human handlers to the bonobo apes. Again, you need to do some further research if you're interested in that. But of course, this doesn't surprise me, because I've long since been a dog owner. When I was a kid in the 70s, I had an Alsatian. And I remember so well, I think I mentioned this before, how when my mother was coming for her weekly trip to visit us about 100 miles away from our house, probably about halfway through the journey, the dog absolutely knew that my mother was on the way, and we would know that she was on the way because he was chasing his tail and going crazy in the sitting room. And we knew that meant that my mother was on the way. And of course, in those days, we didn't have mobile phones, so it was impossible to confirm that. But more often than not, within the next hour or so, my mother would walk through the door. And of course, I know that many animals have this ability to feel things. You hear about birds taking flight just before an earthquake. Well, maybe they hear something that we can't hear. I don't know. Or maybe they know something. There definitely seems to be within animals a very highly developed sense of psychic ability and ability to pick up things psychically, either from the environment or from people or from other animals. And that's obviously been very, very useful in evolutionary terms for survival and finding food and finding mates. But this is obviously something that is clearly in us, and this links with what's been said in the last month or so about humans being able to interact and communicate with interdimensional beings. And obviously the origin of prayer an ability to speak to ghosts or to speak to spirits or to gods or however it may be. We all have this ability to a greater or lesser extent, and we all have the ability to learn to make it stronger if we want to. But it's kind of like a dormant power for us, because we've just learned to survive within our environment as we think, without needing to use that particular sixth sense. I would argue that we probably have been using it all along, but we just don't recognize it. And maybe because science kind of ticked over and said, well, there was no such thing as that. There was nothing demonstrable as psychic powers or telekinesis or telepathy or, so therefore it made us all feel a bit stupid talking about it. So we just tried to pretend, oh, no, come on, it's nothing. So there we are. I think what is interesting, these three particular subjects this week that I wanted to talk about, they all relate to the confluence of religion, how we perceive life after death, and the similarity between that and our experience at the moment, finding out about interdimensional beings, visitations from other planets and everything else. Though it seems to be all massively connected. Well, of course, I believe that now, and I don't think it's a great surprise that it's all coming together now. But how it's being interpreted by religious groups, how it's being interpreted by people like myself is also very interesting. And I suppose we've got to be careful a little bit that information that is coming from interdimensionals, which may be affecting the course of human history, it could be interpreted maybe wrongly in the hands of fundamentalists of whatever religion that may be the case. And of course, that is a worry, that if people really do say, for instance, that Donald Trump is almost like the second Messiah. I mean, and I think he's almost presented himself as being saved by God when that assassination attempt was made on him. An awful, awful event. But he's certainly trading on that. And he's saying that, basically he seems to be having some form of almost supernatural assistance in what he's doing. He mentioned yesterday again as well that, most definitely, had he been in power, there would have been no terrible massacre of Israeli citizens in that terrible October invasion of Israel. And he said there would have been no Ukraine conflict with Putin either, because it wouldn't have happened if he was there. So, he does present to his followers this almost supernatural ability to be able to sort everything out. And anything under his watch will be fantastic and wonderful. And I think people most definitely will believe that. And they are almost making that a quasi-religious thing. And it's quite dangerous, I think, because people are going to use the information at hand and to sort of twist it to bolster their own particular either religious or spiritual or political narrative. So finally, where do we go from here? What next? Well, in today's newspapers, there is some news which I think is going to substantiate all the stuff I've heard about things coming to a head in sort of January, February, the beginning of this particular year. And what has happened is that there is a Florida congresswoman, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, and she's been privy to all sorts of classified UAP files. And she posted onto social media yesterday the following, that an announcement next week that will impact the entire nation. Now, obviously, that's very cryptic, and people are very interested as to quite what that's going to be, particularly since this lady is a very pro-disclosure lady and believes that UFOs are of non-human origin. And so we're interested to know exactly what's going to be revealed in the next week. I obviously hope a lot. What's particularly interesting about this lady is that she has been obviously this Luna Moskovitz is her name, and other lawmakers have been banned by law from saying what they've heard during closed-door briefings on all of this stuff. And therefore, it would seem that some military whistleblowers, as has been discussed by Ross Coulthard and others, are going to come out in the next few days or next few weeks and finally start talking about stuff that we've not heard about before. And that stuff that has been up till now top secret. I think it is good. We're finding out that all these other whistleblowers, such as Grush, who were really restrained in what they could actually say to congressional hearings, are going to feel a little bit more emboldened now. And that certain programs that the United States government has been running have not been known to Congress, or at least there's been no proper oversight as to what these programs are. And finally, a new documentary is about to be released, and it's called The Age of Disclosure, and it's by filmmaker Dan Farah. And it's going to feature on record interviews with 34 current and former senior members of the US government, military, intelligence community with direct knowledge of unidentified aerial phenomenon. And it's going to discuss how there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of this non-human intelligent life. Again, a lot of it's probably not going to be new. Maybe there will be something new in it, and maybe it'll help us get a bit more public interest in what's going on. But I'm looking forward to hearing that or seeing that documentary as well. The documentary is being advertised in advance by saying that it's going to discuss the biggest discovery in human history. So that's really it. Thanks again for listening. I wanted to get all this stuff out there this week, and I'm hoping in the next week or so to answer some of the many emails that I've received with people wishing to get in contact with relatives who have passed on. I haven't forgotten about you all who've written to me. Thank you again for doing that, and please keep writing. I just haven't felt the relevance of talking about that while I'm still very, very emotionally and almost physically affected by what's going on in terms of this alien disclosure and the parallels between that and faith and religion and life after death. That seems to me the most important thing of the age at the moment. And in a way, by talking about that, I think perhaps those of you who are waiting for me to help you get in touch with your loved ones who've passed, I hope you'll kind of understand in a way that really the best way to say it is to tell you that your loved ones never passed. They just carried on in the long journey that is existence. They moved from a physical body that we could recognize back into their non-physical body, and they continued in their existence. And it's a question, not that they've gone, it's a question of how do you contact and how do you make sure that you have that connection with them after they've gone. And as we've discussed before, many of you will continue having that connection, either because you've got your own ways of doing that, maybe through meditation, using pendulums in your dreams, having visits to mediums, or even, if that would be nice, listening to my podcast and listening to what I say. But, please, it is 100% certain in my mind that everyone who has ever lived will live again if they choose to. That everyone can contact the people who have been here before. Many of them may have already been reincarnated into other lives and are just existing side by side with you, because there is no time. And I think it's a wonderful thought if it would help people understand and get over the grief. That if you saw that when somebody dies or if somebody is very ill, this is just the normal, unfortunately perhaps for us, it's just the normal side of being human. Our bodies are just flesh and blood. They're just, carriers for our soul, for our interdimensional self. And it's not a terribly good vehicle. This flesh and blood animal is remarkable in its own way, but it's so prone to disease and damage. It's going to happen that things are going to go wrong. It's like a very badly built car. When it works, it can be a supercar, and when it doesn't, it's a dud. And maybe see things like that a little bit more, and just be sure that this isn't it all. There is so much more to our existence than just this human life, this toil, this struggle, but also the good times. And enjoy that thought, and know that all of this is something that will become so clear to you if you investigate more. And of course, when you pass on, it becomes abundantly clear. But I'm not saying anybody should necessarily look forward to passing on, because you're here for a reason. You chose to be here for a reason. You wanted to go through this experience. And it's probably, as the atheists say, it's what atheists feel makes life so wonderful. If you feel that this is all you get, then you can really enjoy this life even more, because it becomes really special if you don't get another. Well, I don't believe that, but I do believe this wonderful feeling that an atheist has. And I have that feeling myself, because I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of people around me dying, although of course I'll be sad and of course I'll be upset. But I know that it's not everything, and everything is just transitory. That's the nature of life. Thanks very much, and see you soon.